to name compounds like this. It's a very big challenge to most science students. Today we'll be looking at how to name simple inorganic compounds. Then before we start naming the complex ones, if you're new to this channel, please kindly subscribe and stay with us, as we're going to make this as simple as possible as it can be. Please stay with us and enjoy this moment. I have devised a simple method on how to correlate naming inorganic compounds with English language. Now, these are the alphabets in English language. We have letter A to Z. We have total of 26 letters in English language. Now, in chemistry, these are our letters. We call them the elements. We have a total of 118. Now, as you can see the size of our letters, it means it is going to be a little bit more complicated than the English language. English has 26 letters. We have 118 letters here. We call our letters elements. Like English language, you have to bring a consonant and a vowel together to create a sound. The same thing is applicable to chemistry. We're going to see how we'll combine these letters together or combine these elements together to get what we want. Now, for a starter in English language, if you want to make a word, you simply get let's say G, you put it together with O, a vowel and a consonant, you get go. You get I, you put it together with an S, you get is. You take a T, put it together with a O, you get to. Now, what do we call this kind of words? We call them two-lettered words. So it's also applicable to chemistry. Now, in the case of chemistry, when we're putting these elements together, we're going to start with two elements together. We call them binary compounds. Now, in chemistry, when these elements come together, we don't call them words, we call them compounds. So when an element combines with another element, they form what we call compound. But in English language, when they put a letter and another letter, they form what we call a word. So you're going to take a compound to represent a word here. Now let's begin. Now, the binary compounds are compounds that are formed when I combine two elements together. Now, how do I do that? The same way in English language, you need to get a consonant and a vowel to create a sound. In the case of chemistry, you need to take an element first, another element second, then you combine them together. Now, it is the second element that has a change in name, but the first element, the name is always pronounced in full. For example, when I take sodium and I take chlorine and I put them together, I name it sodium chloride. But how on earth did we get these names? So I'm going to break it down for us. And I'm going to focus on something which I call the IDE rule. So whenever you have two elements combined together, that is a compound, the last element, you're going to shorten its name to IDE. Now we have some common elements that normally comes at the end of this compound formed. Example, I have oxygen. So whenever I say oxygen, I'm going to shorten the name from oxygen to oxide by adding IDE as a suffix to the name. When I have sulfur at the end of a binary compound, I'm going to have sulfide, that is IDE. I will shorten the sulfur to sulfide. When it is chlorine, I'm going to shorten the chlorine and then I'll add the suffix IDE to it. Instead of chlorine, I will have chloride. If it is phosphorus, I will have phosphide. If it is carbon at the end, I will have carbide. If it is hydrogen at the end, I'm going to have hydride. So whenever I see this, whenever I see two elements combined together, so the name is always the focus. The principal focus of the name is at the last element. So I'm going to shorten the name of the last element by adding the suffix IDE to it. Now let's take some examples. Example number 1, Na2O. Now Na is sodium, O is oxygen. Now they are combined together. Now I said our principal focus is going to be on the last element, and the last element from this combination is oxygen, and oxygen from the IDE rule, because these elements are binary. Remember, this rule only applies to if the element, if the compound formed are binary, that is, they are two lettered, that is Na and O. So the last element here is oxygen, so I'm going to shorten oxygen to oxide, and the first element here is sodium, so I'm going to pronounce the name in full and then I'll shorten that of the oxygen. So the name of this compound is sodium oxide. Now it is also applicable to this CaO. The first element is calcium, the second is oxygen, so I'm going to pronounce the name of the first element in full and then I'll shorten the last one by adding IDE. So this is going to be calcium oxide. This is Al2O3. Now I'm going to advise you to forget about the atomicity written down. You can see the aluminium has 2, the oxygen has 3, so we're going to leave that alone for now. I'm going to focus on the element because this is just the way they choose to combine as a result of their valencies. So it's just aluminium and oxygen I'm seeing here as elements irrespective of the numbers. So I'm going to pronounce the name of the first element in full, aluminium, and then oxide. So this is aluminium oxide. Now if you have other elements apart from oxygen combining like chlorine, you have NaCl. This is sodium, and since chlorine is the last element, we're going to add the IDE rule to it. It's going to be sodium chloride. This is calcium chloride. This is aluminium chloride. As you can see, it is basically very simple. All I need to do is to pronounce the name of the first element in full and then shorten the name of the second element by adding IDE. What about if it is hydrogen? I have NaH. This is sodium, the first element, and this is hydrogen, the second element. So I'm going to say sodium hydride, and hydrogen has been shortened by applying the IDE rule to it, making it sodium hydride. If it is calcium, CaH2, it is calcium hydride. Now you can see that the numbers of the hydrogens are changing, and also when we're given the previous example, you saw the number of oxygen also changes. Now there are two things applicable here. One is writing the chemical equation, two is calling the names of the compound. So we're going to know why these numbers are changing when we begin learning how to write this chemical equation. So if it is aluminium, it is going to be AlH3, which is aluminium in full, then hydride by adding the IDE rule. So it's called aluminium hydride. What if it is carbon? Now carbon can also combine to form binary compounds, and carbon, when I shorten carbon, is going to be carbide, that is CaRBIDE, by adding the IDE rule to it. So I have NaC, sodium carbide, calcium carbide, aluminium carbide. So as you can see, it is pretty very easy to name these inorganic compounds, these binary compounds. A binary compound is a compound that is formed when two elements combine together. So I call this the two-lettered word of chemistry. So I'm going to drop in some of examples here so you know if you can be able to name them. Please feel free to comment on this video or where you have an issue so that we can address the comments. If you're coming in for the first time, please kindly subscribe to our channel. We would love to see you all the time.